Hey guys, on today's episode, we have our executive director at Impact, Chad Lentscher, again with us, and we're talking about God. We talk a lot about the second step and 12-step fellowships, and there are some popular opinions and maybe some unpopular opinions, but we share a lot on our experience, and we talk about the doubts and prejudice that a lot of people come up against as well. So tune in. Welcome to Impacting Recovery Uncensored. I'm your host, Sarah Pritchard. This is a podcast where we dive deep into the real uncensored truths about addiction, recovery, and everything in between. No sugarcoating, no judgment, just honest conversations that can help lift up the solution. So let's get started. Today, we have Chad Lentscher. For those of you that do not know Chad, he is our executive director at Impact. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Sarah?
I'm pretty good.
All right.
Well rested.
Good.
It's always nice when you come in here and you're well rested. So today we are going to lean into the second step and talk about some things that people outside of 12-step fellowships are often uncomfortable talking about. And we're talking about the second step. There's different steps in different 12-step fellowships. And so that's what we're going to lean into today, and this concept of a higher power, and just, share on that.
Okay.
I think it'll be great because it is something that there's a lot of misconceptions just around different fellowships in general with that. And so the alignment with certain belief systems and things like that. So
the topic itself is pretty contentious.
Yeah.
And I've, gotten myself in a little trouble talking about this, but I try to stick straight to, in line with what our text says.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've had a lot of people argue with me about this, but they're arguing with the text. They're not arguing with me.
Right.
So we'll try to stay true to that.
Yes, I like that. Okay, so let's start simple.
Okay.
What is step 2 really asking us?
So came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I'll believe when I'm restored to sanity. I think really what the step is saying, it's further convincing us that we're insane around the drink or the drug.
Mm-hmm.
And there's really no way out other than this spiritual solution.
Right.
Which is a tough pill for a lot of people to swallow.
Yes. I mean, I remember I was told you have to see your insanity in step 1 to even get down with the fact that something can restore you to sanity. Because if I don't think I'm insane around the drink or the drug, then why in the world would I need any help?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Agreed.
And I know we're going to talk about step 2.
Yes.
But I think we have to talk about step 1 a little bit. I think that I'll just speak for myself. I paid lip service to this idea that I was insane, but my actions said I thought I had a behavioral problem. I left treatment thinking, I know what's wrong with me now, and I don't want to drink anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to be good. This idea that at certain times I'm going to experience or could experience insanity if I don't get and remain spiritually fit, I don't know that I totally bought into that. I am going to feel the way I feel now for the rest of my life.
Right.
I don't want to drink. I'm not thinking about drinking. There's no desire there. My thought life is so clear around the drink and the problems that it's caused me. Why would I ever pick up again?
Right. And I also think it's important for us to touch on what insanity is around the drink or the drug, because if you're insane, you don't really know you're crazy.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on what that means for an addict or an alcoholic?
And I think we've broken this down on a previous podcast, but who's to say everybody saw that one? So it's probably important that we go through that. I always talk about the sane mind versus the insane mind, and the sane mind automatically, with no effort on our part, just eliminates insane ideas or options. Without a sane mind, it would take us forever just to do very simple things. Putting on a pair of socks, I'd have to consider, should I put them on my hands or put them on my feet or hold them, one on my hand, one on my foot?
Yeah.
We don't have to do that. We know where our socks go, and we just, with no effort we just put them on our feet, right?
Yes. Unless you're my 3-year-old and almost 5-year-old, because they put socks on their hands. But yes.
And then the insane mind works in a real similar way. It eliminates all sane ideas. So we have all these sane and sound reasons to never drink again. We love our families. We want to experience some level of success. We want to have freedom and be healthy. And then that insane idea will creep in, something like, I can take a Xanax. I've never had a problem with Xanax. And then all those sane ideas are pushed to the side, and all I'm left with is this insane idea.
Yeah.
And so when we say we have no choice, a choice would be a decision between 2 or more options. Well, if all those sane ideas are pushed to the side, there's only one option there, therefore no choice. It's the only thing available to me, and it makes perfect sense.
Yes. And so the gift of recovery is that we get restored to sanity.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. What I hear a lot is I'm no longer thinking about drinking or using, which is nice. It's a pleasant way to live. But that's not really what we're after. What we're after is sanity, that my brain is never attempting to deceive me around the drink or drug. In the 16 years that I've been sober, I've never had that experience. I still have using dreams. I had one within the last 7 days. I had a long relationship with drugs and alcohol, just like some of those toxic relationships, romantic relationships we've been in. We revisit those from time to time. But what I haven't experienced in 16 years is maybe there's a way I can do this successfully.
Yes, for sure. And so that is sanity. So why do you think that the second step and third step and the concept of a higher power or spiritual solution is such like a sticking point for so many people?
Because we like to be self-sufficient. We like to do things on our own. And I think that's ingrained in us as children. You having children, you've probably said this to your child recently. When they, if they draw something, what adults say to them is, oh my gosh, did you do that all by yourself? Or they come out of the bathroom, you're like, did you go potty all by yourself?
Right, yes.
And so it's ingrained in us that self-sufficiency is good. Anything we do all by ourselves is better than doing it with help.
Right.
And specifically help that is beyond human, of the spiritual nature. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Like, let's get real. Let's
figure this out.
Let's come down to earth a little bit.
Right. Okay, so the language of a power greater than ourselves is broad. How do you explain or explore that with someone new? I mean, I kind of know this, but to share it with others.
I think the misconception is that 12-step fellowships use that language to either ease somebody into the God idea or deceive is not the right word, but like, hey, let's just throw this softer term at them.
Right.
So they can get on board with the God idea.
Yeah. Well, and there's many people in recovery have heard this of somebody like it's a concept of your higher power. Like, pick your concept, whatever concept. It's like the doorknob, the light bulb, and I know that we know, and it's much deeper, obviously. And
I think the idea is real simple, and this is the part that's contentious. The first time it uses that phrase in We Agnostics, and it talks about a power greater than ourselves. The main object of this book is to find a power greater than ourselves, which will solve our problem. It's 2 sentences later that says, and of course we're going to talk about God.
Right.
My perception of what the book says is power greater than ourselves and God are synonymous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're talking about God.
Right. I know. And the thing is, and I understand that there are a lot of people out there that have had experience growing up and have an idea around this word God, and how do you if somebody has grown up and has this idea around God that is negative and they're not really cool with it, what questions are you asking them to find out if they're open to coming to believe?
Well, I'll ask them, are you open to the God idea? I'll start there to just kind of to get their temperature.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when this is explained, there shouldn't be a ton of conflict there. I don't think the authors of our text were trying to confuse us with this. And so if it was simple as, hey, just pick whatever you want, make something up, I think they would have given those directions in the pages.
Mm-hmm.
And what they say is we don't need to consider another's conception of God. Our own conception, however inadequate, is sufficient.
Yes.
And so, I always try to come up with good metaphors, and I don't know how good this one is, but if I've never eaten pancakes, but you've told me pancakes are delicious, that's your understanding. I can adopt that if I want and run around and tell people like pancakes are delicious. But until I've eaten them, how would I know? That's your conception.
Right.
And so I think what the book's encouraging us to do is, hey, set aside everybody else's conceptions that you have adopted as your own and really look inside and look at your own experience. What is your understanding of God? And so when I first did this exercise, I looked at what I was told as a child, that God loves me first and foremost. Look at my life. I don't feel like God loves me.
Right.
That's somebody else's understanding based on their experience with God, or maybe somebody told them that.
Yeah.
And so I just set that aside. Our book asks us to lay aside prejudice. That was a prejudice or a doubt that I don't think God loves me. I don't have any evidence that God loves me. God is forgiving was the next one that I always heard. Well, I live in way too much guilt and shame to buy into that. Like, that's not my experience. So something else I had to lay aside. And so I really had to do some soul searching, like, okay, what experience do I have with God?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, what I came up with, and I think a lot of people seem to run with this one because most of us have experience with this. We live such a high-risk lifestyle. I drove under the influence way more than I should have. I participated in illegal activity on a regular basis. And through a 10 to 15 year drinking and drug career, I came out the other side pretty unscathed. I could buy into God has been watching over me.
Right.
I mean, there doesn't seem to be any other way.
Yes.
And so that's where I started with that.
Okay, so kind of going back to this idea of step 2 talks about we came to believe. It doesn't say we believed. What's the importance in that wording, you think?
I think it gives us an opportunity to have an experience with this, that we don't have to start at any particular place other than our own truth,
Mm-hmm.
around our experience with God. I I went back to college when I got sober. And I would say accidentally, I'm sure God had plans and designs around this, but I landed in this Christian college. I didn't want to go to a Christian college. And I was required to take these Bible classes, which I didn't want to take. And the main reason was I thought I was going to be the dumb kid in the class.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that a lot of people probably have fear around that I'm behind on this God idea. I haven't explored this. I wasn't raised with God in the house. We didn't pray before meals. We didn't go to church.
Right.
And I don't want to be the dumb kid in AA.
Yeah.
And so I think it gives us permission to be okay with being where we are around this idea,
Mm-hmm.
that this is a process.
Right. Right. And I love how you share the protector or God has watched over you and all of us, because that is such a good starting point. It's like, how can you argue with that? If you're going to be willing or try to be willing, you can't negate the fact that you have been safe, or this imaginary drug addict I'm talking to right now. But
or even the opportunity to get well.
Right.
To be in a position to be sober long enough to at least have an opportunity to do this.
Yes. And I think it honestly takes the pressure off a little bit, because it's like, at step 2, I don't have to be this like, oh, I'm so bought in on this God idea and because like I said, there's so many people that have all different beliefs and ideas, and that's great and fine. But it takes the pressure off of like, I don't have to have all the answers. I just will I can believe that I will come to believe.
And nor should we.
Right.
We've been busy. I've been, you and I were both doing other things before we arrived here.
Yes.
And it wasn't waking up and getting on my knees and searching for, solutions to the mystery of the universe.
Right.
Like, that's just not what I was participating in.
Yes. Yes. And so, yeah, I mean, and there's a woman named Alec in Atlanta, and she talks about like, it's an invitation.
Yeah.
She talked about it at the alumni event.
She was great.
Yes. And I love that, because it's an invitation. I'm like, am I gonna attend the party? Like,
Yeah.
I gotta go to the party. Okay, I gotta do some work around this stuff. But again, I do like the wording, because I do feel it takes the pressure off, because you're so fresh. Like, for me, I'm so fresh out of detox or the hospital or whatever it was. Yeah. Just like, okay, I'm just going to trust this process. I'm just going to trust, whatever.
And I would challenge people that shut down around this idea to just question why. Why do you get so defensive around this? And I was thinking about this morning. If a human being was liked by thousands of people, loved, adored by thousands of people that knew them personally, and I didn't even know them, had never put any effort into having a relationship with them, never spent any time with them, and I'm like, I hate them, or they don't exist.
Right.
Like, is it possible that you're the problem?
Yeah.
And then I got to look at that. And I think that's what step 2 kind of invites us into is, we start looking at that and really all the first 3 steps.
Right.
Is it possible that I'm the problem? It's not everybody else.
Right.
It's not God.
Yes. Yes. And how it talks about like, as a higher power or God, or as we understand God. And I think that verbiage can be difficult for people as well, because for me, it's like the way I understood God is I have experiences around it, versus like, I think understanding means I need to understand the manual on how to put my kids' toys together or to be able to make it work. But it's really just having an experience with this power and a new experience that I had never had before.
Yeah.
And it talks about spiritual experience and different definitions for that. But But it's true. It's like once somebody has gone through this process, I'll speak for myself, and I've had a spiritual awakening, spiritual experience, I see the world differently.
Yeah.
I react differently. Everything's different.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that existed. And I didn't pull that off myself.
Yeah, I think we get real evidence of something is causing a change in everything going on around me and with me.
Right. And also, this kind of makes me think of, so when, let's talk about if somebody's atheist or agnostic. And we've kind of like danced around this a little bit.
Yeah.
But what, how do you handle that, or how do you approach someone?
My view may not be very popular with some. The title of the chapter in our text is We Agnostics. It's not we agnostics and atheists. It's we agnostics. We all experience some agnosticism. Wherever I doubt the power of God is where I'm showing some agnosticism.
Mm-hmm.
The atheist piece is a little tougher. If somebody's just absolutely defiant, like no way, no how, I don't want to hear it.
We can't help them.
Why would they want to be involved in this?
Right.
It's a spiritual program of action.
Right.
Based on a relationship with God.
Yes.
Like, why would that even be appealing?
Right. And something that I was going to mention that kind of sparked this is the episode where we had Devin talking about neuroscience. He was talking about, he's been around a lot of people in science that are so anti-religion or spirituality, and he was I forget exactly how he worded it, but just the fact of like, they can be so just gung-ho about like absolutely not, which is a little ignorant, just as like, because they're talking about like religion and how they are crazy, or he didn't say that, but it goes both ways, like looking at them. And I didn't say that right at all, but do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but the truth is I encounter this, and we all encounter this very, very seldomly.
Mm-hmm. Right. Agreed.
We talk about it and find ways to kind of bend the rules and guidelines around it to avoid making people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We shouldn't do that. I don't think it's necessary. That same school I was talking about that I went to, I had a biology professor that said nothing proves the existence of God better than science does. He said, look at the human body. You think this was an accident? And we were talking about like DNA and RNA. He's like, get out of here. Like something created this. It's
right.
Unbelievable.
Right.
And that,
yes,
pretty profound.
For sure. I agree. Yeah. Okay.
The last thing we want to do is, get in a big online debate with a bunch of scientists and atheists. The problem is when I encounter them, they're usually more intelligent than I am.
Yes.
So it's not a battle that I don't want to fight that.
Right.
Like,
well, and it's totally okay. Like it is totally okay, obviously, for anyone to believe what they want to believe.
Yeah.
But like you said, why would you want to hang around us if the whole program is about God?
Well, and that's where the problem arises.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've invited this new ideology into the fellowship and into these meetings, and people are talking about a spiritual experience and God and the power of God changing their perception and who they are in their lives. And you got somebody shaking their head going, it's just not true.
Yeah.
You don't need to believe in God.
Right.
And so then it just gets a little weird.
Yes. Well, and just personal experience with trying to help a woman or something. If they can't be willing to believe, then I am not the person for them because I can't help them. All I can do is share my experience and how I got where I am and show them how to do that and hope they get the same results. But if they're not willing, then it's just kind of like, okay, that's totally fine. There are plenty of other options out there.
There are.
And call me when they work. I mean, that's this. I guess I'm just so passionate because I know this works.
Yeah.
And somebody goes off and does their own thing. It could totally work, but they're betting their life on it.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets really scary.
Yeah.
And it's like, I know this works, so just try this. Yeah, try this. Those others could work, but why not try this?
Yeah.
So.
And the question I usually present is, what are you fighting for?
Mm-hmm.
Fighting for the opportunity to be right about something. And so if they're open to hearing it, I'll always explain that I am open to being wrong about all of this. That there is no God, there is no spiritual experience. We are all this is all self-sufficiency and a new way of living. And through human power, we have changed our own lives. And we have fooled ourselves into believing that God did all this. But what if I am wrong? I live this happy, useful life, and then I die and there's no God and I never know any different.
Right.
But what if I'm right? And the person I'm talking to is wrong.
Right.
Like you said, we're gambling our life on this. It just doesn't seem worth the battle.
Right.
Like, at least, all right, I'll give in.
Yeah.
I'm open to the idea that you're right about this.
Yes.
And if I find out, with absolute certainty that you're wrong, I'll go do something else.
Mm-hmm. And yes, I agree. And so I also think that something that's really cool about recovery is we are a place where if somebody does have doubt and prejudice, we can talk about it freely.
Yeah.
And, that may or may not happen in a certain religious setting because, like you said, going into the class, you're like, I don't want to be the dumb one. I'm not going to talk about this. But what's really neat about recovery is if there are throughout somebody's sobriety, if there's doubts and prejudices that come up, it's a space where we're able to do that. And I guess, what do you think the value is of exploring those doubts, either when they're taking the second step or even just throughout somebody's sobriety and recovery?
I think it gives us an opportunity to have a really profound experience around it.
Mm-hmm.
When I came in, I took a look at this idea of God being forgiving and determined I have no evidence of that, no evidence or experience of that in my life. And then I start making these amends through the amends process. And all of a sudden, I start having an experience with other people forgiving me forgiving other people, and eventually me forgiving myself. And now I know a forgiving God. And it was profound. Yeah. But if I never even bothered to take a look at that, or I just went with everybody else's conception, like God's forgiving and ran with it, I would have missed that powerful experience.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You can't, that makes sense. You can't experience forgiveness unless you've actually experienced. You can't feel it unless you have experience with it.
And I think a lot of us come in and we just, we've heard too long by too many people that God loves us.
Mm-hmm.
So we just kind of accept that as truth.
Right.
And then we don't even notice when we're experiencing real evidence of that. When I started to discover, oh my gosh, God does love me. Almost every time early on, it brought tears to my eyes. I'd start crying.
Yeah.
This is unbelievable.
Right. And not to get too much into the third step, but
I thought you were going to say in the weeds. I'm like, we're already in the weeds.
talking, kind of going off of like God's will versus self-will and all these things. And as you're saying this of like, once I actually accepted God loves me and like seeking this power, and like, I just think I always call it the Chad Lentscher approach, because you just let things happen in your life. Like you are.
Oh, thank you. It's very sweet.
It's just like you're one of few people that in, I would say most areas, obviously I don't know everything, but things just happen.
Yeah.
And they're just like given to you. And that's how we know it's God's will, when it just kind of like falls into our lap. And the example I've used recently is like this podcast, like it just kind of happened.
Yeah.
And I've really enjoyed it. And it just kind of unfolded that way. There was no effort on my part to try to make something happen. And it's a little bit of a tangent of what we're talking about. But our book talks about God comes, or I'm paraphrasing, God comes for those who earnestly seek him.
Yeah.
And when we're earnestly seeking him, living an honest life and participating, we get the gifts.
Yeah.
So
there is nothing good in my life that took, I'm not saying it didn't take effort along the way, but it didn't take any effort to make it happen.
Right.
Like once it started to happen, then yeah, I had to exert some effort into it.
Yes.
But I don't know that I've made anything happen in my life since I've been sober. It's a life of invitation.
Right.
And I receive an invite, and
yes.
I consider it carefully, and
yes.
What would God have me do in this situation, and try to make the best decision around that. And things just kind of fall into place, and they happen very organically and very seamlessly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we kind of touched on this at the beginning, but I think as a group, many are scared we're going to like turn people away, when in reality, most people are open to this God idea.
Yeah.
What do you think the value of talking openly about faith and doubt, not just in the recovery community, but in life? What do you think the value of that is?
I mean, it makes us authentic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people find that believable if I never discussed any setbacks or doubts or fears, and I was just like, God is amazing, rah, rah, jump on board.
Yeah.
You have nothing to worry about.
Right.
The water's just fine, come in. I think we all walk into recovery in the middle of a God crisis.
Mm-hmm.
I think every single one of us does.
Yes.
And I think we have to recognize that, and we have to be relatable. People have to understand that, hey, we came in pretty uncertain also.
Yeah. And it's just, and that's part of why we're doing this podcast, is sharing the solution that has worked for us, and to give people hope, and to that living this way of this spiritual life, things just unfold. Like you said, like when you're talking about, I had to put effort and say like, okay, what would God have me do or be? We're living on spiritual principles. And then, as many of us say, like the outcome's not up to us, but as long as we show up how we truly, out of love and, honesty and willingness and open-mindedness and all these things, all these spiritual principles, then things just kind of happen in our lives. And that's attractive for somebody that's fresh out of detox or fresh out of treatment or fresh off the streets, because again, it's a lofty concept for somebody that's like, I need to stop putting a needle in my arm. I need to stop drinking vodka 24/7.
Yeah.
How is God have anything to do with that?
Yeah.
And it's taking action to get a connection to that. It's not just having this idea.
Well, and I think that's why it's so important that we break down step one correctly and effectively, that we can get a person to say, hold on, there's no other way.
Right.
There's no other options.
Yes.
And then we would say something like, there might be, I know they're available. I just don't have any experience with those. What I have is experience with this, and I know that this works.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So do you think that step 2 is more about spirituality or humility or both?
I think it's all about humility.
Mm-hmm.
I think humility is the thread through all of this. The 12 steps are an exercise
Right.
in humility. And it's the one thing I had none of when I walked in the door. Didn't even know really what it was.
Yeah. What does humility mean to you?
The best definition I've heard is understanding my true relation to you and understanding my true relation to God. So my true relation to you is, Sarah, you are no better than me, not even by a little bit. And I'm no better than you, not even by a little bit.
Right.
In my true relation to God, and again, tough pill to swallow, he has power and I have none.
Right.
All I have is access to his or her power.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I like that. What would you say a healthy relationship with step 2 looks like over time?
I think it's honest. I think we pay attention to it. And so one thing I have the guys that I work with do is when we write inventory, after the inventory process in the text, it says, we thank God from the bottom of our heart we know him better. So if I know God better, my understanding of God has changed through this inventory process. And so I have this understanding of God that I wrote in step 2. I need to take a look at that. There's more to add to that based on the work I did in 4 and 5. And so I started with this conception or understanding that was that one sentence. Like, God, I'm buying into the idea that he has been looking after me, protecting me. I have evidence of that.
Right.
And then, I talked about the experience with forgiveness in the 9th step. And so then I needed to add that to my understanding, and as I saw different things and had different experiences with God, my understanding of my conception continued to grow.
Yes.
And I took the time to write that stuff down.
Yeah.
The problem is if I don't do that, and we see this regularly, I wake up 6 years sober and I think, look what I've accomplished.
Yes.
Look what I have done.
Right. Which is a very scary place to be because...
I'll walk away.
Right.
Like, I don't need this. I have mastered life.
Right. Killing it.
Yeah.
Yes, I know. And because the book talks about rest on our laurels, which means our own achievements. And that's a delusion in itself because it's not our achievements at all. It's just like these are given to us in the gifts of sobriety and recovery and all these things. And I've talked about this before, but that's what happened to me. I had a year, whatever, and I got all these cool gifts and achievements, and I drifted away, and then I got drunk.
Yeah. I at the risk of going down a rabbit hole, I've thought about this a lot, and it goes back to that self-sufficiency. If I bring this up in a group of people, it'll create conflict. And it'll create conflict online. But as human beings, what can we really take credit for? I think about everything that my sponsor Jaime has done in my life, and I give him a lot of credit. But the truth is, God gave him the willingness, gave him the opportunity, gave him the intelligence to get well and then to help other people and then fit this situation where we were able to meet. It was all orchestrated by God, and all the power that he was able to pass on was accessed through God. I mean, I don't know that there's anything as human beings that we can really take credit for.
Yeah.
People don't want to hear that. Like, what do you mean? My ego needs credit. It needs praise.
Right. Well, and I was about to say, like, that's true humility.
Well, I think everything is simply a gift. If you're smart, thank God. If you're a good athlete, thank God.
Right.
And I get that that's usually where the argument comes.
Yes.
Athletes will tell me, I have worked my tail off. Well, even that, God gave you the willingness and the opportunity. And
Yes. Yes. I mean, I say all the time, like, I'm so grateful. The willingness has not changed within me from when I woke up in that hospital bed this last time.
yeah,
The willingness to continue to seek out and do this has not changed much. And that is a gift.
yeah.
So,
And I think even the cooler gift in that is it's driven by something different today.
mhm.
You wake up with this desperation of a drowning man just to be sober. And then God restores you to sanity. It's like, all right, he solved that problem. And now all of a sudden I'm driven by, how do I be a better man? How do I connect with people on a deeper level? How do I connect with God on a deeper level?
Yes, for sure.
And I still have the desperation, as I think you do as well.
Yes.
Around that. I wake up as desperate today as I was, when I first got sober. It's
Yes.
just driven by something completely different.
Right. And that is important, so important to point out, because if somebody has some time, they haven't touched drugs or alcohol for a very long time. So that no longer is the pressing issue. The pressing issues are life.
Yeah.
Life stuff, life things.
And life is hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard. It's difficult to be a human being.
Yeah.
And I think it was designed to be difficult because if it wasn't, we wouldn't need God.
Right.
And I think just that realization in itself has been incredibly helpful to me. Like, it's okay. Life is hard. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to grieve. We're going to be sad. We'll have some highs and lows. But what remains consistent is that I show up and I do the same thing every day, no matter what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, so last question I have is, if someone is stuck on the concept of God or higher power,
Mm-hmm.
what do you suggest that they do?
I always do the same thing. I have them go through their doubts and prejudice, and really about anything in relation to God, religion, spirituality, God, spiritual terms, just anything you disagree with that challenges your beliefs. Let's just write those down. And then let's agree to just set those aside.
Mm-hmm.
And then, do you have any experience or evidence of God in your life at all? And have them really do some soul searching and look at that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us can start with, just some of the privileges that we have in our lives that we were born into, maybe you have great parents. Like, you didn't have any say in that,
Right. Yes, I agree.
Or great siblings, or a great best friend,
Mhm. And a lot of times, I'm sure you will agree, it's the problem. It's not the God idea. The problem is truly believing in their alcoholism or drug addiction.
Yeah.
And believing that it's bigger than them. That's the
that
problem.
God is even necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more tied up in, I have to be able to solve this on my own.
Yes.
And it goes back to, you get more credit if you do it yourself.
Yeah. Right.
Which is a fool's errand. It really is.
Yes. Okay. Well, I enjoyed that. Thank you.
Yeah, that was we'll see. We'll see the response we get. That's always a difficult discussion, and
It is.
we probably should have prefaced this with, I certainly don't think I'm an expert on God, religion, spirituality, and I don't think you do
Right.
either. And we reserve the right to be wrong, and nobody has to agree with us on any of
Yes.
this.
Well, and it really is just sharing what has worked for us and what we have seen and do that can be helpful. And again, there's always other options out there.
Yeah. If you don't like it, just leave it.
Exit out of the episode if you don't like it. But yeah, no, I think this is great. We need to talk about it's the essence of our lives, recovery, it is everything. So we got to talk about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's silly that.
Well, and I think a lot of times we want to avoid the conflict.
Right.
So let's not discuss it. Let's let everybody have their own ideas. The problem is people need direction when they come in.
Yes, they do.
And so we need to give them some.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
I think it'll be helpful. And thank you for tuning in to another episode. I hope today's conversation has inspired you and opened your mind, hopefully your heart. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And also don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps us on YouTube. And then we will have all the links below for our social media. But until next time, keep making an impact. Bye, y'all.